Well, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today. As she mentioned, we are going to talk about working with PM. So a few topics in particular. We'll talk a bit about the different roles and responsibilities between PMMs and PMs, get a bit into how to strategize and plan efficiently with our PM partners, and then lastly, how to build lasting relationships with them as we go through planning cycles and work streams. So today I'm joined by a panel of great product marketers, and I'll let them all introduce themselves before we kick off. So Jesse, we'll start with you.
Cool. Hi, all. I'm Jesse Lopez. I work at Brex, but I actually come from a history of CPG. So I was in consumer packaged goods for about a decade, then did a transition to tech through Intuit, then I went to Klaviyo, then most recently at, it was Intuit Square, Klaviyo, Brex. Currently, I lead product marketing for the spend management product. So that's basically a new product that Brex built in the last year or so. It's a SaaS product. The easiest way to explain to all of you is we're the competition of SAP Concur. And if you've played around with that software, you know it's really painful. We are in the business of helping you save a lot of hours when it comes to expense management.
Awesome. All right, I'm Chelsea Suarez. I'm a product marketing manager at Dropbox. I'm over launch strategy, so I basically am responsible for the planning and execution of our biannual launches that we do each year. So I actually initially started my career as an intelligence officer. 5 years ago, I switched into tech, initially in product management, and then a few years ago, I switched to product marketing.
Ashish Malpani, I am the global head of product marketing at Progress. And yeah, I mean, my biggest challenge with Progress is, of course, I mean, the previous session, I have a team that is spread from Melbourne to Portland. So, managing and really working with that team. But my journey has been kind of different. I started as an engineer, did technical marketing, ran product management for a while, then switched into product marketing. And of course, there is a reason behind that. And I'll bring that up in our conversation. But then, yeah, last few years, I've been focused on really building high-performing product marketing teams.
Awesome. And I'm Serena Jenks. I'm currently a global product marketing manager at TikTok, where I've been for the past 4.5 years. Most of my career has been in the agency world and startups, but most recently, I was at Google on their PMM team covering privacy and automation. So a bit of PMM background as well as more generalist marketing. And we're really excited to be here today. So before we get into the discussion, we do have a fun interactive poll because we know that the working relationship between PMM and PM, it can be fluid, especially the PMM role could be different at companies depending on size, industry, things like that. So we have one question. What are the typical job responsibilities for a PMM at your company? And feel free to check all the boxes that work for you.
That's a pretty good mix, I guess.
It is.
Kind of all across the board, it looks like.
But the real question is, does everyone understand that this is all product marketing?
Awesome. So it looks like we have a pretty even spread of different roles and responsibilities for PMM. So great to get a sense from the audience of what you all know PMM to be and how you define it. We'd love to hear from a few of us, what is it like at your company? So Jesse?
Yeah. Look, I worked at different companies. I think it depends where you sit also. So at Square, I used to sit below a GM. So basically, I was like an equal partner to the PM. Then I moved to Klaviyo, where I sat in a marketing team, and I felt really distant from the PM, and I almost had to beg him for time. My current role is basically under a CRO. So we're really heavily focused on go-to-market, but I'm really good friends with PMs. Because PMs are in the business of shipping, and I'm in the business of telling strong stories about their features and capabilities to the market. So currently I sit under a CRO. I constantly check in with the CPO because I want to make sure that the CPO eventually takes us in. Because in my ideal world, I would sit under a CPO.
Awesome. Chelsea, what about you?
Yeah, so at Dropbox, our product marketing team is under the marketing org. And I feel like that is pretty common for a lot of companies. which means like product honestly ultimately owns the product. However, PMM is still a strong partner. And then as the product gets closer to launch or release, the ownership switches over to PMM, and the product manager is more of a partner, but still ultimately owns the product.
Yeah. And Jesse, I think you made a great point about just the size and structure of a company, because when I was at Google, I was very far from PM. Even though I was a PMM, there was an intermediary team in between us. And now at TikTok, I'm very close to PM. So just depending on how your org is structured and where the PMM role fits within the organization, I think that could definitely sway how close you are to the actual team. So cool. All right, well, thanks so much for participating in that. We're gonna get into some questions about strategizing with our PM partners, because we know, as we plan for new product launches and what that roadmap should look like, obviously company revenue and those bottom line metrics are important for us to optimize for, but at the same time, a key part of our role is making sure the voice of the customer is being represented and incorporated into the product roadmap. So I have a question for you, Ashish, first. How do you go about setting goals and OKRs in partnership with the PM team?
I mean, I'm just literally going through that process because now our quarter starts late.
Yeah.
But I mean, for me, the key is understanding product marketing OKRs overall, and I think we got a really good mix from the survey here, where we had people focused on not just messaging, but also kind of sales enablement, analyst relations. It is, for me, when you're looking to work closely with PM, your OKR should be aligned to really driving that product kind of leadership. And when I say product leadership, it's not just launching new products. It's how do we take what we have, really drive that as part of sales enablement, external evangelism, as well as making sure that we have the right metric assigned for new product launches. So this is something that I've worked very closely with my kind of product management partner, where we have all of our team members sit in a room together and say that, okay, here are the product OKRs. I mean, here are the growth targets for the business unit. Based on this, here is what we are doing from innovation perspective and kind of enhancements perspective. And to meet this, I mean, here is how we expect this product to be kind of have a wider audience reach or whatever the deal is. And use those as your kind of driving factor to build the OKRs.
Yeah. I think that's a great point you mentioned about just getting in a room with them. I think when I think about setting OKRs with my PM partners, it's not that hard if we have consistent and frequent touch points throughout the quarter where we're already building that relationship, sharing ideas, sharing opportunities, sharing roadblocks. So by the time it comes to planning time, we both have a pretty good sense of what the other person cares about and what we've been discussing potentially prioritizing in the next quarter. So that I think that collaboration is super important, ongoing and not just around planning times, to get that buy-in early and reduce a lot more friction in the process.
Could I add one point there?
Yeah, please.
I think one big lesson that I've had in the past years is that sometimes your OKRs won't match side by side. And I'll give you an example. So like when I was at Square, both PM and PMM were accountable for revenue. So I had PM behind my back saying, what are you doing to drive revenue? So that was like a constant battle of like, how can we both drive revenue? Currently, in my current situation, the team is basically in the business of driving activation success for the customer. I'm currently not focused on that piece. We're focused on the PMM side on scaling. So I'm all around collateral and making sure that sales enablement and implementation teams know our product, know how to sell it, know how to implement it. That's completely different from what the product team is doing, which is in product. But we've been very vocal about aligning that we're going to be different for, let's say, the next 6 months and hopefully converge later on. And that was a big lesson for me because when I first arrived to Brex, I tried to match everything to the PM and I realized I was not going to be successful. I had to figure out like what my own agenda was and make sure that the PM understood that.
That's a great point. It's definitely about not just conceding to them, but also showing what you need to get accomplished as well. So Jesse, I'd also love to hear from you. How do you ensure that your PMM perspective is included and integrated into the PM initiatives?
For me, and this is what I've done every time I move companies, but also what I tell my reports, you never want to create more work for the PM. So the easiest way to like become a partner to them is to embed yourself into their meetings. I promise you the first few meetings will sound like gibberish, But I think once you start to understand how they run and how they think, you can become the devil's advocate or the voice of the customer inside those meetings. And I will tell you that many times I'll have meetings where they're like, there's a really cool feature, we should monetize it. I was like, you don't think about pricing in a featured level, you should think about packaging in a persona or in a bigger way. So I would say first embed yourself into the one-on-ones and into like the meetings that are happening inside the company. He's like, I quickly realized at Brex that they hate meetings. So if I created my own meeting to have my PMM agenda with PM, they would hate me. So I found myself I basically embedded myself into the engineering team and then the PM team. And I basically am a devil's advocate in those meetings. Then I've also made sure to embed myself into their review cycles. So I think someone mentioned this earlier today, but like most product teams have product reviews where they have to like be accountable to the CPO on their progress for the year or progress for the quarter or month. I've basically forced myself into having a section there because I'm part of product. So every time they are talking about a product, like let's say we're going to launch a new feature, I make sure to include myself into that paragraph. And I'm like, hey, I have a perspective around naming or around positioning. I want to make sure that my voice is represented. I will tell you that Brex was not really open to the idea, but once they saw that I added value to those conversations, they're a lot more open to have an equal playing field. They just didn't understand the role PMM initially.
Those are great points. Like very similar, like I was going to say, which is product marketing being part of the core team. And like product managers, like they view like design, engineering, research as being part of their core team, but they don't always view product marketing as being part of their core team. And it's like more than just including product marketing in their core team calls. It's like including you in like their quarterly dependence planning, like their roadmap planning. And like that can be a mindset shift for them, and it can be difficult, but like that's a great opportunity as you as a product marketer to kind of show them like where you add value. And like when you start joining them in like some of those planning sessions, you can show them, you know, where you can help be voice of customer, or like ask some of those questions that they might have about the product.
So one thing I would add, right, and I'm guilty of kind of making the same assumptions when I was running product management, right, where product marketing was always an afterthought. Mm-hmm. And then one of the product marketers that I worked with, I mean, he kind of opened my eyes in a way, right? And we had really good relationship that made it successful. But what really mattered is establishing that credibility early on, right? And not just looking at them and saying, no, I'm here to promote your product. I'm here to create content. That's not my job. I think really telling them that I am, how you are bringing that voice of customer back to the business. And, as you said, maybe just get into the core team. I mean, make your way and make your voice heard, right? And in some cases, you may find that, your suggestions are like really, thrown out of the window, but sometimes, they add value. And once you kind of establish that credibility, things become easier. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, right, if you've heard about this notion, right, the product managers are the CEOs of the product marketers, the CMOs of the product. I don't think that works. Because, if with a CMO mindset, I mean, of course, you are also getting pulled into demand generation. I mean, and they, product managers don't necessarily understand what else is happening in your world. So at least making them aware of, this is not the only thing I'm doing. I'm driving sales enablement. We have a demand generation objectives that we are focusing on. We are also looking at external evangelism. We are doing analyst relations. So really, when they understand kind of the landscape of things that you're driving, maybe that's how it helps build more perspective and kind of treat you as a subject matter expert, voice of customer.
Yeah, I think you make a great point about credibility. Yeah. And Jesse, you mentioned something about internal education is sometimes needed about what is the PMM's role. Mm-hmm. So curious if either of you have thoughts on how to establish credibility with your PM partners.
For me, a roadshow always helps. So like if you create like a charter, you make sure that everyone knows what you do. Because you don't know how many times I get requests of like things that fall in sales, things that fall in implementation, things that fall on the website, which is not part of my my charter. So I would say roadshow, and then the second one would be if you constantly get requests, you have to be vocal about it and just say, hey, look, I don't think you understand my team. Let me sit you down and like, let's talk about it. And I think PMM is one of those teams that like in every company I've been at, nobody knows what PMM does. But we're like the secret ninjas that connect we're the glue of the company, but nobody really understands what we do. So I would say roadshows. Like, make sure that when you have a team, you create a little mini charter, if it's a 3-slide deck, where you say what do you do and when you don't do, and then direct them to the right people.
I would agree with the roadshows, but I've also, not where I'm currently at Dropbox, but at previous companies that I've worked for, I've also experienced where like roadshows were not enough, and it didn't quite like land in product, and they didn't quite understand what product marketing did. And like in that situation, what I did was I just started finding ways that I could do quick wins and like demonstrate to product like what my value was as a product marketer. So if like I was working on a product that was early in development, I would find a way that I could bring in customer insights and like show products like how they can use that to either prioritize features or potentially like make a change on the product roadmap. If it was like a product that was like in the market already, I would look at how our campaigns were performing. Like what did the metrics look like? Is there something that I could do to like also bring a quick win in that way? And like that was the easiest way for me to finally like establish credibility and show them like how we could work together.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think a lot of times you need that data to back up what your opinion is or your POV, and customer insights is a great channel for that. I'm so curious if you all have a perspective on how and when to identify with the PM team when customer insights are needed, because that's often a role that our team plays in bringing those to product.
Yeah, I think it's every day. I mean, you cannot be, if you are truly the voice of customer, then you are, I expect my team to be in customer conversations. And, to the last question, right? One other thing that I found useful is become an expert on your product portfolio. I mean, there is no substitute for that. I mean, when the PM sees you as a kind of their counterpart who also understands the product line, but also understands the business, that helps you build credibility. But also, then when you are kind of, you don't have to pull the PM, but you can now rely, and the sales team can rely on the PMM to be part of that customer conversation. And then, when you come back and say, here is why, this is the conversation I had, and the customer is looking to for these features, it adds more value to what you're saying.
That's a great point.
It depends, because like, the cool thing about Square, and sorry I'm talking about Square, but Square was like a foundation. If you ever want to work at a good company, work at Square. They were full stack PMMs, so I got to do really cool research work at Square because there was just no researcher. So I got to do like surveys. So the cool thing about surveys is that you actually get to quantify like the pain points and like the features they want and everything. And like PMs would love to do that work, but they just don't have enough time in their day. So like if PMM raises their hand, you could totally do it and you have the money to do it. Currently, my current role, we just don't have enough time to do research. So like then you have to find internal resources. So like for us, I think many of you guys probably use Gong. I reserve a specific time every week to watch Gong. And basically it's sales calls where like I watch a bunch of discovery calls and I get a lot of insights into the words that people use and like the descriptions of their pain points. I wish I had time in my day to actually go and recruit prospects, but I just don't have the time in the day. So like I find ways to find those insights in a more qualitative way. Our Salesforce data is not that strong, and I think for the people that attended the win-loss analysis one of the core issues we currently have is nobody logs anything on Salesforce. So
Struggle.
I have to anchor on Qual, but I've also done Quant, and Quant is super fun when you actually have the time to do it.
Yeah, I've done Quant as well. So like when I did product marketing at Expedia Group, we were really good at doing the quantitative, but like Qual was tougher. And like sometimes looking at the data is like not enough to discern like what's going on, especially if you're looking at product adoption and usage. You need like that qualitative information from the customer. And like ways that I've done that is just basically like setting up like customer advisory councils or like being really scrappy and like going out to our sales teams and getting feedback. Or I've even reached out to customers myself that represent like a large number of our customer base and like brought that qualitative insights back to product, and it helps them to understand like what's going on with their metrics.
Yeah, I think it's also important to get a feel from your PM team of what is adequate for them from a customer insight standpoint, because I was actually surprised in my role now, qualitative, they love qualitative, and the quotes, and even if it's a couple advertisers who share a similar sentiment, that is enough to get them to potentially take action, versus at Google, it was a lot more, we need statistically significant results, which obviously takes a lot more time and resources. So getting a sense of what's enough for them, I think, can also help decide the level of effort in which you put into customer insights.
For sure.
Cool. Well, these are all great tips for how to strategize and plan with our PM counterparts. But more importantly, as quarters start and as you start working through work streams, roadblocks are going to come up, new opportunities are going to come up. So let's talk a bit about how to build and maintain relationships with PM. So Jesse, I'll start with you. What are the best tips you have for developing a good working relationship with your PM partners?
Yeah, I put some thought into this, so I actually wrote it because I didn't want to forget it. I came up with three things. So I said consistency and accountability is number one. I'll tell you that depending on the PM that you land with, some of them are very opinionated and they don't even want to listen to you or have an opinion or have a data point from you. So you almost have to set the boundaries and the rules of the game from the get-go of hey, we're equal partners, we're gonna work on this. These are the things that you're accountable for. These are the other things that you are accountable for. Currently, one of the things that I'm trying to drive in my organization is documentation. So partly because we're moving so fast, there's no proper documentation of product. So I'm what I need of you to deliver really good campaigns and really good messaging is documentation. Mm-hmm. And then what I'm accountable for is I need to deliver to you strong messaging that works, and I will prove it to you through A/B testing on website or sales win rates, and I always bring that back to show to the PM, I could also deliver, but you also have to deliver on your side. So accountability, big one. Transparency. So this one I learned early on at Square. You'll never find a PM and PMM that agree on everything, but if you don't agree on something, you should deal with it in private. I realized at Square that our general manager, who's also the CPO, always wanted to see PMM and PM fight. And I was and I realized that was something he got joy out of. But I realized that if I wanted to move forward and I wanted to drive strategy, I had to have meetings with my PM where we could have that debate in closed doors and come aligned to the CPO. That saved me endless meetings with the CPO, and we literally leveraged the CPO just to give approval, rather than just see a fight live in a Zoom call. Mm-hmm. So I would say transparency is a big one. And then last one, humility. So humility, I've seen so many PMMs fail because they assume they know everything. Mm-hmm. And when you don't know something, you should go back to the PM and say, I don't understand your product, or I don't understand your workflow, or the process of how this works. So I've seen so many PMMs create messaging that when it lands, it doesn't explain anything. And the PM never has time to check the messaging. So you really have to understand what you know and what you don't know. So when you don't know, don't be afraid. Just go and tell them hey, I need an hour and teach me everything about this product because I just don't know how to message it.
Yeah, those are great points. Very thoughtful. Thank you. Ashish, do you have thoughts?
Yeah. So I was going to say, put yourself in the PM shoes, right? As a PM, when I was running PM teams, it was always recruit type A personalities, people who can get shit done and trample on people's toes. It doesn't matter, but their job is to lead without the authority, right? And in a way, you have to kind of understand what they are up against and what they're responsible for and what is the mentality that's driving them. And so, in a way, sometimes you have to appease their ego and say, I need your help. In some cases, you say, I know what I'm doing, but so, give me my space. And I think there has to be a two-way conversation, not just, one-way information flow, right? Where they see you as an equal partner. And then, one of the things that we were talking about, most organizations have, you see that, PMs have sometimes higher title than the PMMs. Mm-hmm. You would typically see a VP paired with, a senior director or a director, a senior product manager paired with, PMM. Or a specialist. So how do you make that work, right? They have, again, adopt the same strategies, right? Where kind of see them that, you are their partner and you are taking their message and amplifying it. And the biggest difference for me is helping them understand that, they are building the product from a user's perspective. whereas you are looking at the product from a buyer's perspective. And once they kind of understand it, things become easier.
It's a great way to look at it. So Chelsea, would love to hear your thoughts on, more tactically, how you communicate with your PM team and do so efficiently.
Yeah, I feel like that kind of depends on the PM. And it especially gets a little bit more complicated if your PM is not based in the United States with you. It's Dropbox, like most of our PMs are actually in the US. Like when I did product marketing at Expedia Group, my PM was in Australia. And when I did product marketing at Dell, my PM was in Taiwan. So it was challenging. Because like for me, one of the key ways I would communicate with them is one-on-ones. And that's really hard to schedule when your PM's in APAC and you're based in North America. So what we aligned on doing is like we would do a monthly one-on-one just because like that window of when we were both free, it was like really hard to find time to chat. But we would do a lot of work async. I would use tools like Slack or Teams just to get like a quick message across. I loved Figma and Miro when I needed to collaborate with them on a project. Like I would basically just set it up and share it with them and say like in key areas, like if it was like communication that I wanted to send out or I needed feedback like on some messaging, I would just throw it in a Miro, highlight some of the areas where like I wanted them to review it, and then like they would come in and take a look at it on their time.
Yeah. I think the aspect of international colleagues is just such a challenge with the time zones. And there's, of course, async collaboration is super helpful, but sometimes there's no replacement for having that one-on-one conversation. So something else that I keep in mind, because my PM team is in China, is having that mutual respect and balance of authority. So when you do have to have one-on-ones, and those, personally I like to have those recurring, finding a time that is equally inconvenient for both of you and not super inconvenient for one over the other just helps with kind of maintaining that relationship of, hey, we're partners in this and we're both working towards the same goal. Also, I'll piggyback on what you said, Jesse, about inserting yourselves into meetings that the PM teams are having. I think that's been super helpful for me to just have that credibility and be able to bring the voice of the customer is joining those larger PM meetings where I can and not just having one-on-ones with my core PM partners. So for sure, some other ways to think about it. Cool, and so we only have about 17 minutes left. So the last question I have for the panel is, what mistakes or shortcomings have you faced when collaborating with PM? Feel free to take it away, anyone.
I'll go first. So my first product marketing role was like at Dell, and it was great because in that company, PM is actually in the product org. So it was really easy for me to establish a relationship with product managers. My next role after that was at Expedia Group, and it was a little bit more challenging because product marketing was part of the marketing org, and I think like you kind of touched on that earlier. Like you can feel like you're closer to product when you're in the same org, and maybe feel a little bit more distant when you're in marketing. So like the first product manager I worked with at that company had no idea what product marketing was, just saw me as like being part of the marketing team. It was really difficult for me to get them to understand what product marketing was, how I could bring value to them. And I would say like one of the things that I didn't do early enough was like what I mentioned earlier, which was getting like those quick wins in to establish that credibility and like build that relationship. I definitely took, I would say, several months to finally get to a point where I was like, okay, the relationship we have now is not working. They literally just come to me with a list of things that they want to get done. I don't feel like I have a seat at the table. I need to change this. And what I did was I worked to be a part of those meetings, like those core team meetings, like their planning meetings. I found a way for me to bring in the voice of the customer and showed them like what we could do to increase adoption and usage on one of our products at the time. And like that's when the relationship changed. And like finally they understood like what product marketing was, how it could be valuable. So ever since that happened, I basically like every time I work with a new PM, like I start that early because I want to build like that strong relationship early on.
For me, I think it's the new reality, but like right now, I think a lot of people think they can like do strategy, make big decisions on Slack, and I don't believe in that. one of the secret powers that I think PMMs has is that we're good at writing. And I do think long-form writing sometimes helps with like summarizing why things should work or not work. So something that I learned at Square and that I brought it to every single company I worked at is this framework called SPADE. So if you heard about SPADE, SPADE was created by this guy named Goku. Goku used to work at Square. SPADE is basically a document that you're forced to write in long form your settings. So like, what is your problem or what are you trying to solve? Then your SPADE, P.
Problem?
Problem. Then your problem, then your alternatives, then your decision, then your explanation. It forces you to actually put it on paper. And like, it helped me a ton to like basically work with PM better. It's like PM was basically asking me like, hey, what do you think the SaaS package should be? And it was on Slack. And I'm like, this is not a Slack conversation. So by collaborating on a doc and actually pressure testing each other's thoughts, we then could actually take that document across the whole company and get alignment, whereas before it was happening over Slack. And like the Slack thing, it's so hard to follow and so hard to follow when things pivoted or like who thought what. And I think now in a remote world, documentation is critical because you always want to look back and decide where you made the mistake. And I don't think you're going to be able to do that on Slack, but I think people are going to learn that the hard way.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, we talked a lot today about different aspects of working with PM. So let's try and summarize for the audience. What is your 1 or 2 tips for working effectively with PM? Jess, we can start with you.
This is what I tell everyone. If you want to gain the respect of a PM, come into a discussion, not with an opinion, but with an insight. It's like you want to make their lives better, right? Like the last thing they want is another voice in the room that takes the conversation into like another arena. So like either if that's an insight from customer success or sales or from an interview that you conducted, always come in with a point of view. He's like, I think they really appreciate when you either elevate the conversation or use an insight to support something they're driving. I will tell you that in the past, I've seen some PMMs get kicked out of meetings or like they're no longer invited because they're just disruptors and like a disruptor is not appreciated.
That's a good point. Good tip. Yeah. I guess my tip would be find a way to solve a problem for them, kind of like you were saying. So find like that quick win. I bring that up a lot because it's really impactful because like product is like busy. Honestly, they're busier than us, which is saying something. So if you can come into a meeting and like already know like what some of the problems are that they're solving and like have a solution to fix it, that is like, that's money to them. Like that's huge. And like that's gonna help you to like maintain like that seat at the table.
I will just say, don't ever kind of have a session that's brainstorming. And by that I mean at least have a starting point. Put your thoughts on a paper, provide a starting point for anything that you want a broader team's opinion on, so that you have something to go off of. Right? So I think that I found really successful, especially working with PMs and being on the other side, where if somebody came to me and said that, okay, here is a new product name that you're looking for. Maybe here are some thoughts. I mean, and you can. Everything may get thrown out of the window, but at the same time, people appreciate that you put that effort in and put some thought behind it.
Yeah, that's a great one. I think mine would be trying to strike a balance of mutual respect and authority. And I feel like one way to do that is coming into conversations and the relationship with a very collaborative and open mind of what you all will work on together, what value you will drive, and what value they will drive. And just I think, Jesse, you hit on the head with saying being humble about it, because I feel like both PMMs and PMs are very strong, smart personalities, and it just takes one side to be willing to be open to hearing the other perspective for that wall to break down. So,
one last thing that I think drives a ton, and I think we as PMMs forget, is every PM and every engineer I've ever worked for works too much. And like showing them the collateral that you built for the feature or the product they built, like making a little moment every single weekly meeting to show off some of that work. I've seen people like go from depression phase to like happiest of all. And like, don't forget that, because don't assume that they're gonna see it because it was like on some newsletter. Ask the PM to like give you 5 minutes to show off the work, because it just makes that extra push to the engineer or the PM that's overworked. They feel like they have purpose.
Show the progress that we're helping them.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
That's great.
Cool. So we have 10 minutes left. We can open it up if there are any questions. I don't know if I can.
Do have some questions, and I think, let me double check. I think we have 5 minutes. So I'll pick like 3, and you guys can figure out how you want to chat about it. Here's a fun one. For product management as the business owner of product, how accountable are the PMs in your org in setting and owning product performance goals and tracking? Or are there any kind of shared responsibilities? Like, they build stuff. What are they measuring? What KPIs does it tie into that us as PMMs are also looking at?
I think it depends on the stage of the company. So at like a much later stage, cares a lot more about revenue and around like retention. And I think the earlier you go, they're like trying to like seek product market fit. So like they're checking usage inside the product. Currently, what I'm seeing a lot is we're trying to track win rate, activation, and then retention. Because we're trying to like drive that funnel. But I think it depends. But like I would say, try to figure out like what drives your company and really learn the business. So like something that I noticed at Square is I'm a finance major, so I know how to do P&Ls like front and back. So I inserted myself into financial planning. Even though PM had no role, I was like, I have a perspective and I can actually build the plan. But it depends on the company, and it depends if the PM has like a revenue number. At Square, they have a revenue number, so like every single quarter, they have to map out what their goal is for the next quarter. Currently, in my current company, that we're not doing revenue, so it's not a big.
Hold on, where do you work again? They're not doing revenue. That sounds
Rex.
lovely.
Rex.
Kidding, I see it on your shirt.
No, I know.
Love that for you. Okay, so another fun one on. No, seriously, like, imagine, like, I went into like digital marketing and I was like, this is cool as shit. And then I'm like, ew, we have to report on like pipeline and like numbers and spend, and I have to And then you go to product marketing and then you're like, what are we measuring stuff on? Everyone's like, I don't know. I'm like, this is kind of nice. But then to like not be measured on revenue, I mean, sir, we like that. I mean, I do. Okay, other question. Tools. What PMM and PM collaboration tools do you find most effective in managing that relationship? Even if it's not tools, because again, like, I know we're hung up on tools and the hot AI ones and automation, but like also tools can be exhausting. So like, what are just in general things that you can recommend to strengthen that relationship, either as a tool or in replace on whatever, not a tool?
I can start. It's actually pretty funny because in my startup life, I used Asana all the time. It was an amazing tool to work with my different colleagues. But at Google and both TikTok, we don't use any project management tools, which I find very crazy. But somehow everybody gets their work done. And so what I found to be most effective is using your one-on-one docs and like ending each meeting with recapping what the AIs are and who's responsible for what and by when. And then this ultimately is on that person then who's agreed to those AIs to accomplish it. So that's typically, it's pretty basic, but I just use our one-on-ones to fine tune, who's responsible for what.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I would also like add to that and say like figure out what tools your PM is already using and then like see how you can leverage that yourself. Because sometimes it can be challenging if you're trying to introduce a new tool and you're just basically adding it to the list of tools that product has to work with. So like I've used tools like Confluence because a lot of product managers would use that just to manage things. I've used like Miro and Figma. I've had product managers that prefer that when they're looking at like roadmaps. So I think like also figuring out like what tools your product manager prefers to use.
Yeah, and I'll kind of really reiterate that same thing, right? Whether it's Jira, AHA, I mean, whatever your engineering and PM team is using, maybe just make an effort to learn and maybe try yourself kind of really inserting into that workflow. And then of course, I mean, you have your collaboration tools and email, but anytime like you do one-on-ones and make sure that you summarize the discussion and kind of really outline the action items that you've agreed on. Right?
Okay, last question. hot topic for most, I'm assuming. And again, we're not blaming anyone, but stuff happens. So how do you handle your PMM role when the PM roadmap, it says keeps getting delayed, and I want to make that more, I mean, when it could be delayed, but in reality it gets delayed often. How does that work for you guys? And again, it's engineering. There's other factors. Resources are pulled, but what does PMM look like for you guys when the roadmap slips?
I'll start. I mean, I'll give you an really funny story. So I joined this company. I mean, I won't name the name, but after 2 months into the role, my counterpart on the product management side quit, and took their deputies with them. So we had a product management team, which was like really junior people and had no clue about how to run product management. So when my first thing was, do we have a roadmap? And then the answer was no. Like, what is roadmap? And so it started there. So and then they're like, why do you need a roadmap? So I had to go into full education mode and say, here is why I need a roadmap. Here is what I'm going to use the roadmap when I have customer conversations. So from there, it was really kind of setting the expectations and saying with the product management team that here is what I need from you to be successful in my role. And once kind of we established that, even kind of the depleted product management team was able to deliver that, and then that's how we made it work.
For me, question was, and I have the thought in my head, but what was the question, just to make sure that I answer the question? Oh, so that's going to happen in every company. I've never seen a company that can deliver a roadmap. So I would basically think about your go-to-market plan as like a modular system where you could build stuff and then wait for some other pieces to get delivered. So I'll give you an example. So in my current company, we kind of know where we're going to go. So I already know my messaging, and my messaging will be consistent, but then features will help increase the value of that given messaging. So just making sure that you really understand what the vision is and what they're going to be building, so you can start to prepare for it. So maybe you don't create a thought leadership paper, but you can definitely start creating messaging. The thing will eventually ship. So I would think about it as a modular system versus trying to create everything at one point, because nothing is ever going to work that perfectly. In tech, it did work in CPG, but not in tech.
You guys wanted differentiated marketing. How about this for a tagline? We'll give it to you eventually. I love what you just said. We'll ship it eventually. We'll build it soon. But okay, long, slow clap. Make it really dramatic, because we also have to cheers off the stage.